Good evening. Welcome to Let's Talk About Mental Health. I'm Nels I'm an addiction psychiatrist and I work in Southern Vermont.
My name is Robert Stack and I'm a licensed alcohol and drug counselor and a licensed mental health counselor.
I just want to remind people the two ways to get your comments and questions to us. The first of these is through our Facebook site, which is www.facebook.com/letstalkvt, or at our email site, which is questions@letstalkvt.com. And today we have two guests in the studio with us. We have Brattleboro's Police Chief, Mike Fitzgerald, and the Police Department's social worker, Kristen Neuf. We'd like to welcome you tonight. And you know, our focus this season has been about the community. We had Ron Staley, who's the school commissioner, on here a couple of weeks ago. School superintendent, superintendent, here a couple of weeks ago. And given the vital role that the police play in the health and safety of the community, we thought it was really appropriate to invite you two on here tonight as well.
Thank you.
Thank you for having me.
Welcome.
Yeah.
Please, we'll give you the floor. Yeah.
Well, what I would like to just bring to light is some of the good work that's happening down at the police department and the circles of mental health. And police encounter individuals suffering some type of mental health crisis almost on a daily basis. And often family members and other members of the community are also present during this crisis. And in the past, there have been tragic events that have occurred where people have been seriously hurt or, killed in the interaction between people suffering mental health crisis and the police. So we have taken it upon ourselves to address that issue. And we have a social worker on staff, Kristen, Neuf, which brings it up to the next level, our responses to the next level when dealing with persons with mental health. So we can get them the help and care that they need in the right time frame and the right agency and things of that nature.
How long has that been going on? When did you introduce that program?
The first police social worker came to Brattleboro in 2006. And Sarah was here for approximately 5 years.
Okay, yeah.
And then Kathy was here for approximately a year, and about a year and a half ago, I started here.
Can you tell us a little bit about what you do and how you interact with the community?
I work right next to, literally in the police cruiser, oftentimes with the police department. Sometimes I'm in the office and I receive referrals from them. Sometimes we just chat in the hallway. Sometimes I do individual work, case management on my own. But there's definitely a collaboration with the police and myself. I work with people who are struggling with mental health and substance abuse, duly diagnosed people, people who generally are doing okay, but they have some problems or two or three or four in what we might call a self-sufficiency matrix, certain areas in their life where they need some support. And because of those areas, they may come in contact with the police department. And the police and I communicate together, often at a scene where the police arrive. And I look to their expertise for safety. Sometimes they will talk to me for some feedback in a clinical way of looking at things. And each situation is very different. Each person is very different. Each situation is different. When we arrive on the scene, it's very important to be receptive as to what's required. I'm thinking, who is the client here? It may not be who you obviously think. What's needed? And I do that respecting the expertise on safety with the police while we're doing that.
That's very important. Kristen's exactly right. You get into problems if you start getting out of your primary role. And you have to stay in that primary role. You have to understand what the other person's primary role is and respect that. Our primary role is security for the person experiencing a mental health crisis, the safety of everybody involved, to include the social worker, the police officers, and everyone present. It's not to diagnose, to assess, or any type of crisis resolution. That's Kristen's job. you know, and our job is to make sure she can do that safely. And there's probably, if you look up in law enforcement dealing with mental health, there's 3 models that usually have happened. The first one is the Memphis model, where they would actually take a law enforcement officer and train them into, you know, mental health crisis intervention. And the next model would be you would have a crisis worker on call for the police department. And then there's the Team 2 model, where you would have a law enforcement who is basically trained in very general terms in mental health crisis, working with a mental health crisis worker who's basically trained in what police would do. Brattleboro is very unique in the fact that we have Kristen on staff with us. I mean, this is pretty unique, and it was a program that was started 8 years ago, 2006, through 8CRS. It started out as a grant, and the success has just been phenomenal, and it's been continuing since.
And I think you mentioned before the show that, you know, not every interaction between you and the citizens ends up in an arrest.
Correct.
I mean, you know, and I think that it's so hard, and you mentioned this, that, you know, you can't measure things that have not occurred by successful intervention. I mean, and so, you know, if you just looked at the arrest column of, you know, in the local paper, you get this impression, and yet there's so much more going on in the community. And I think that was one of our reasons for sort of asking you to come on, is to talk about some of these other interventions and how people in the community can utilize your resources, or how they get involved with it like that. So, you know, if somebody seems to be out of control or causing a disturbance, how does that go down? I mean, how does that progress from someone calling up and saying somebody's out of control in a local store, for instance? What happens next?
Each instance is different. Like I said, we enter with a blank slate, and I'm very relationship oriented. So when I come onto a scene with the officers and I'm respecting their judgment on safety, I try to form some sort of common ground and some kind of relationship with the person that I'm talking to. And I think people can really read into, if you genuinely respect them, regard them with dignity as well as respect, and to be very receptive to what they're looking for a goal as well. There are many areas that a person may need help with. They may want that help in certain areas and really not want to go there in others. So it's right when we sort of land on the scene, it can be a follow-up. And I let the person in the community determine if they want long-term case management or not. I've worked with people for a year. I've worked with people for a day. And depending on how receptive they are, they're the ones that steer that boat on what I'll do to continue and help them.
And I think that's a great point, that sometimes calling the police is not about getting punishment. It's actually about getting them help. And I mean, I think for a lot of times you sort of hesitate to make that phone call. Like you said, that sometimes there's people in the community and other people notice that they're having trouble. They notice that there's something else going on. We talked about this last week with Ron Staley, that in some of these school incidents, if you look back in hindsight, and I know that's 2020, there were indicators. There are other people that might have picked up on something. And I think there's sometimes a hesitation to call the police because you say, oh God, I don't want to get them in trouble. And I think, you know, I'm hoping anyway, that one of the things that happens when you call the police is they get help sometimes. I mean, you know, I mean, it's not about getting them in trouble. It's about avoiding the trouble. It's about avoiding what's happening. So
that's a shift within our community we have to work on, and it is going to take time. It's also a shift we have to work at the department. You know, that the organizational shift, way of thinking has to also change. That, you know, it's to protect and serve. And like I've said in the past, we have our criminal procedures when we're processing, you know, suspects. We have that down pat. We have that really good. Where we need a lot of work on is the serving part. How can we get out in the community and actually help? And when people do call us when someone's having a mental health crisis, it's probably reached a crisis point for them to call us. And then when we come up, we have to determine is this person having a mental health crisis, or are their actions due to criminal behavior? And that's the decision we have to make. So we're like we're at the crossroads. We have to look at this individual and determine which path they're going to go down. Are they going to go through the mental health path, or are they going to go through the criminal justice? And that's where Kristen's expertise greatly comes in. You know, are we going to bring them to the PD or to the hospital? Pretty much.
And communication comes in. We talk to each other when we get there. That's very important. And it's amazing how receptive the police department is to just going back and forth and planning for each new situation and being open-minded to what the needs are for the person.
I mean, in our work too, it's very hard to balance that, because particularly with so much work we do in addiction, there is that sort of, you know, criminal element to it, being that it's illegal, and that balance between, you know, treatment, you know, consequences, you know, reparations, you know, long-term care. So I can imagine with us, we have sort of the leisure of sitting back and having some time, but you don't often have that leisure. Probably a lot more tense, a lot more need for a quick decision.
Exactly.
Now, when you hear that somebody's, I do substance abuse treatment or counseling, I used to, and when you hear that somebody has overdosed, is that an automatic intervention? I mean, does that result in the police coming, or is that, does rescue get involved without the police? I mean, I just wondered how that goes. So do you get involved at that point when you find out that someone has overdosed from opiates? I mean, what's the procedure there?
We absolutely get involved. We'll be there, and once again, for the safety of everyone concerned. If someone's ODing, there might be other factors that we're not aware of at the time. So we would go in there with the medical first responders and get them help. You know, get them up to the hospital and get them help. As a matter of fact, if you are in that room partaking in that type of activity and you call for help, you cannot be prosecuted.
Now, that's a recent law that was changed, right? And they did that on purpose, because people were getting dumped at the emergency rooms.
A version of the Good Samaritan law, right? You can't be prosecuted for being helpful.
So that's fantastic, and that's what we want. So, and then once they get up there, at the next day or the day after is when we'll do some type of follow-up to see what we can do to help them, you know, get out of that cycle and start making some good decisions.
So I just want to repeat that, if you don't mind, just to be clear about it. So if there is somebody and you're with somebody and it appears to be that they've overdosed, that you know, they don't respond, it is safe for them to call the police.
Oh, yes.
Let them know that somebody is in desperate need, medical help, whatever it might be. No one will be arrested at the site.
No.
Is that okay to say?
Yes.
But you will follow up and speak to the individual perhaps a day later or 2 days later. Is there arrest at that moment for possession?
Not at that moment.
Not at, you know, like because they took it.
Right.
You know, on some level that qualifies for possession, but you would not follow that up with a.
No, if it's in their system.
It's in their system.
You're not going to get arrested for possession.
You're not going to get it. Okay, so.
No. What we hope is that you get the help you need, and unfortunately, at the time, they accept it, but that may not be the fact in a week, which you guys are more experts.
We know all about that. Yeah, you hope that one opportunity is going to be the catalyst that you need. But you know, we're sort of talking about these sort of crisis events or very high tension events. I'd like to also talk more about sort of the preventative work that you do, because you wrote a piece for the Commons talking about the community policing approach, and it struck me very much as being one, making a connection with the community, sort of establishing relationships outside of a crisis, but also that had to do with sort of prevention too. I mean, as we said, we don't know what we're preventing, but we do know the sort of relationships, healthy activities do a lot to prevent illness and you know, crisis.
Right. To have a successful police department, you have to have the backing of the community. And for a community to be successful and have a high rate of, you know, standard and livability, you have to have a good, successful police department. It works hand in hand. And you know your neighborhoods. We don't know your neighborhoods. You know what is odd behavior. You know if that car belongs there. Things of that nature. We don't. So I encourage the community to get involved, and get involved on all levels. You know, a lot of volunteer work needs to be out there. Our officers are getting more involved in being accessible and transparent to the members of the community, more involved in a lot of the good social agencies that we have within our community. And I mean involved, not just attend the meeting. I mean actually get involved, find out what's going out there, and, you know, helping out as best we can.
Yeah. And Kristen, you had mentioned ahead of time, you've done some of this work around the state, and you're impressed with these guys here, aren't you?
Oh, they're a great group of people. They really are. They're very open-minded, very human approach, very positive, very respectful of the people that they come in contact with. There's a program that we have called Coffee with a Cop.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And talk about community policing. People just come on in and chat and talk, and it's a very positive thing that happens every now and then in the community.
One of the things that I want to, and I know, well, over the years things have really changed, and one of the things is how people respond to domestic violence and domestic violence in our community. And you see it now. I was watching football last night, and they had football players saying, no more silence, no more, it's just this, he'll cut it out or whatever. Would you like to say a little bit about the roles of domestic violence and how you respond to that call when it comes in, and perhaps what your role is in that case and how that works?
Well, it's certainly a horrific crime. It affects everybody. It affects children, families, in your castle, your sanctuary. I mean, it permeates the walls of your house, and it's how it destroys lives is beyond, you know, speech for us to sit here and talk about that. But at the same time, as in the past, it was probably the biggest, darkest secret that would happen, and nobody wanted to talk about it. And I'm very glad that it's finally coming out in the open, that it shouldn't be tolerated at any level. And you're teaching your younger children that it's not okay, that lifestyle is not acceptable, and to get those people the help that they need. And I keep saying that a lot, and we talked earlier about it. I'm not advocating that people are not held responsible for their actions, because they most certainly should be held responsible for their actions. What I keep saying, giving them the help they need, is you hold them responsible for their actions, but you have to have some type of help that's involved, so they don't repeat those actions or make those decisions again, and show them why it was wrong and things of that nature.
Yeah, and this is prevailing impression in mental health as well. One of the guests we had on last year was Mary Ellen Copeland with the Wellness Recovery Action Program. And whether you talk about your addiction or depression or bipolar disorder, you still have a responsibility for your wellness, you have a responsibility for your actions, your engagement in care. And so that's a pretty, you know, I think that's something that's agreed on then from both of our perspectives as law enforcement as well as with mental health.
Right. And you know, when I used to do groups about change, you know, one of the things is pre-contemplation. That's somebody who's not aware of the need for change. And you know, quite frankly, DWI, or involvement with the legal system, sometimes will get people's attention. And I don't mean that in a funny way. I just mean that, you know, really, it's sort of like you get away with drinking and driving and get away with it. But if we catch you, we will ticket you. Right. And you'll go in the system, and then we'll get you help. You go to crash, exactly. You get lessons, you get everything. And it's actually, and I know people hate this idea, but at DWI, it can actually save your life. It could benefit your family. It could change, you know what I mean? Like literally. And if it's not a problem, then cut it out. You know what I mean? Or if you can stop, stop. If you can, you know. But if it is a problem, let's get help for it. Let's not ignore it. And so I think at some levels, I mean, when you hear about a DWI, and it sounds like, you know, when anybody ever gets a ticket, it's always like it's the cop's fault for getting a ticket. It's not their fault. You know what I mean? No, really. You know, if you get a ticket for speeding, it's like, oh, well, he was hiding. You know? I mean, yeah, but you were speeding. But I mean, like, but I really believe, I think DWIs are so important for policemen to do that.
Absolutely.
Because from it, it's like that ripple effect. It's like throwing a rock in a pond. I mean, it just changes everything. I mean, you can't deny it anymore. It's official. It's right here.
Right.
And you can respond to that in another way. So I just, my hat's off to everybody who gets a ticket. And I know people who gets tickets, well, I hate to hear that, but I think it's a good thing. I think it's a positive intervention. And before the show started, and we both talked about this, and we were just so impressed with that wonderful police work that that officer did, that went from breaking in a Memorial Park and stealing from the car, and then the chain of events that led to a seizure of 2,000 bags of heroin in Brattleboro. I just was, I felt so good about that.
I did too.
You know how much misery 2,000 bags of heroin caused? I mean, you cannot calculate how much stolen goods, how much family misery goes into the purchase and use of 2,000 bags of heroin. I mean, forget about the money, forget about the out-of-state or whatever. In our community, that is so much misery. I mean, we have store owners in town who the biggest problem, one of the problems with making money, is not necessarily their taxes, it's shoplifting. I mean, there's a lot of it going on. I mean, it's just, it takes the profit out of everything you sell when you lose something going out the door. And a lot of the petty theft, breaking into cars and all that, is really this, I don't know if it's still true, but they used to say you have to steal $100 to get $10. I don't know if that's the right breakdown or not, but the idea is that, the larceny is to get money to get drugs.
Well, there was the estimate about a year ago that said that for the average opiate-addicted person, it costs about $100,000 a year. And of course, that's a lot of black market economy and things going back and forth, but that's a very impressive number when you think of what it takes to make that kind of money or have that kind of money pass through your hands.
So, go ahead.
That was just I'm glad you brought that up, because that was just a great example of, people, the citizens of the town calling in and saying, I mean, we had a rash of break-ins. And when you start hearing the descriptions of vehicles leaving the scene, and instead of you going there and pulling out your ashtray and your change is gone, and you just, say a couple cuss words and get in your car and go on your merry way, they actually would report that. And, we started looking at dates and times and, vehicles descriptions. And then we got that call where the latest one was, and we just started doing follow-up after follow-up. And we did a traffic stop, and the whole thing, through just good, solid police work, evolved to, that evening with that drug bust. And that was just across the board. I was very proud watching how the different shifts came together, all the different briefings, the intelligence that's went into it, and the research, and everyone just worked long hours. They worked really hard, and the end result was we got 2,700 bags of heroin off the street.
That's right. And what people don't realize is that in Vermont, a lot of this opiate addiction started off with pills. And it started off with pills that were diverted from lots of different sources. But they started, choking down on that pipeline. They started making, keeping track of pills, keeping track of prescriptions, and, the federal government got involved. But the problem was that a lot of people then went to heroin, which is a different market. I mean, in some ways, that's really what's happened. And so what went from being taking pills and taking, out of medicine chests or whatever way you want to talk about diverted pills, and there were lots of them, it's now moved into this, back into bags of heroin. And people find themselves, and I used, I've said this many times, a lot of our residents, if you went up to them in high school or, in their 20s and you said, would you like to do heroin? They would say no. Right. But if you said to them, would you like to do a Percocet or a pill? Yeah, sure, I'll try it, Not realizing that this is opiates. This is not, you're not just playing around here. So the only reason I say that is I just think that, when you have a small bust or arrest or something, I think that's as effective in the community as the big one, the big dealer and stuff. I mean, because I think the message has to get out that these drugs are dangerous. They're dangerous to the community. They're dangerous to the individual. and they're harmful to the family, to quality of life, if you will. So I always hope that, you know, people learn about these things. You know, these things do happen. If you do these drugs, there are consequences. There are things that are going to happen. And I mean, I really look at the police department as a partner in that. Mm-hmm. So there's lots of different ways, I think, that when you talk about community policing, I just see a lot of benefit in it.
Absolutely.
I'm sorry.
And it goes right back to what you were saying earlier about the DUIs. You know, we bring it to light, and you're going to be held accountable for your actions, but at the same time, you're going to be offered assistance on how you can be helped so you don't make those kind of decisions anymore.
Right. And you know, we're going to have David Gardenstein come on. We're going to talk a little bit about it. But like you said, when you arrest somebody, you do it as a full arrest.
Correct.
And then it gets sent to
State's
Attorney's Office. And if they decide to do something, that's fine.
Mm-hmm.
And then if that doesn't work, you said the arrest goes into...
Exactly.
But again, that's their decision. Your job is to get that to that place.
To get them in the system.
That's right. And,
Yeah.
and I think that's extremely beneficial. Mm-hmm. And it's good work, and it's positive work.
It is positive work.
I think a lot is missing from the police. I mean, I got in the habit, anyway, people don't understand that thing about serving, of being partners with the police. Mm-hmm. Rather than seeing them as, oh, there's the police, they're after us, they're going to catch us, they're going to do something. I don't think they quite get this idea that the police are partners with the community. You know what I mean? Like, you know, we should really work together with this. They're not a hostile force.
Right.
They're not an occupying army. I mean, they are part of us. They are part of our town.
Sure.
And they need cooperation. So, I mean, I hope that's true.
Well, I couldn't agree more. And it's if you look at our criminal activity, is that doesn't take up a majority of our day. A majority of our day is more of, lack of better word, social work. Mm-hmm. You know, dealing with people out on the streets, people that are homeless, people that are addicted, people that have questions or concerns that they have nowhere else to go to call. You know, there's a loose dog, who do we call? Mm-hmm. Well, let's call the police. You know, I found a wallet, what do I do with it? Well, let's call the police. So, I mean, we do a lot of quality of life work, along with, obviously, you know, the criminal activity and things of that nature. Well,
we got a couple minutes left in the show. Is there anything that you would like to finish up the show with, or a message that you'd like to share with the community? Either or both of you?
I kind of monopolized
Go
it.
ahead.
I'll give you the last 2 minutes.
I just think the Brattleboro Police Department is a group of very evolved individuals who care about the community and are willing to treat each individual with dignity and respect as an individual. We collaborate. It's a nice dance that we do on a day-to-day basis. There's a lot of communication. They look at a situation not as safety or mental health and substance abuse. It's a combination. And each individual is an individual circumstance with different needs. So I can't get it out there enough that the Brattleboro Police Department is a group of fine individuals who definitely care about the community that they work and serve in.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And just a couple of seconds.
I would just, real quick, if you have any questions about the vision or the direction of the Brattleboro Police Department, feel free to come on by or give me a call at 257-7950, and we can we'll sit down and chat, have a cup of coffee, and discuss your concerns, your fears, and where we're going.
Yeah, no, absolutely. You guys are part of the community, and been part of the community for quite some time, from BUHS days to now being the chief. So
yep.
Thank you for coming on.
Well, thank you very much.
Thank you for
It's been great having you. Thank you for the work that you do.
Thank you.
Yeah.